Now, there are growing concerns about Iranian climber Elnaz Rekabi, who competed without a hijab at a competition in South Korea in defiance of Iran's strict rules. The decision by Rekabi to forego the hijab came as protests sparked by the death in custody of a 22-year-old woman who have entered a fifth week. A post has been made on Rekabi's Instagram account today apologising. However, it's been reported that the athlete's phone and passport have been seized by Iranian officials. Now, we've just had this statement in from the International Federation of Sport Climbing. They say there is a lot of information in the public sphere regarding Ms. Rekabi, and as an organisation, we've been trying to establish the facts. We've also been in contact with Ms. Rekabi and the Iranian Climbing Federation. Our understanding is that she is returning to Iran and will continue to monitor the situation as it develops on her arrival. It is important to stress that athletes' safety is paramount for us, and we support any efforts to keep a valued member of our community safe in this situation. The IFSC fully support the rights of athletes, their choices, and expression of free speech. Well, our chief reporter, Kaveh Solokol, joins us now. Good afternoon to you, Kaveh. What's the background to this story?
Well, look, for the past 5 weeks, there have been widespread protests across Iran. And Iran, almost uniquely in the world, is a religious dictatorship. For the past 43 years, it has been ruled by hardline Islamic rulers. People have very few human rights. There isn't a free press, there is no freedom of expression, freedom of thought even is curtailed. If you stand up and challenge the regime, or if you say anything against the regime, you will be dealt with very, very severely, and at the very least, you will end up in prison. Now, for the past 43 years, women have been uniquely targeted by the regime. They have even fewer rights than Iranian men. For instance, they have to wear a headscarf when they're in public, just one of the many, many restrictions that are placed on women in Iran. And over the past 5 weeks, Iranian women and also Iranian men, and especially young Iranian men and women, have said enough is enough. And they have been protesting on the streets continuously now for 5 weeks. The security forces have been dealing with them very, very severely, arresting people, beating them up, shooting at them. According to human rights organisations, more than 200 protesters have already died, including, I think, about 23 children. So what Elnaz Rekabi did this weekend was very, very significant, because she was competing in an international tournament in South Korea, in Seoul. And for the first time, she took off her headscarf. You can see in those pictures, she competed just wearing a ponytail. Now, that is very, very brave for an Iranian woman to do that. Now, I have to say, Iranians are not offended by that. If you're an Iranian, you see nothing wrong with those pictures. The only people who are offended by that are the Islamic regime that rule Iran. And whenever we speak about Iran, you always have to differentiate between the Iranian people and the Islamic regime that rule the country. So what has happened to her since she competed without a headscarf is very, very murky. What we do know is that she was taken to the Iranian Embassy in Seoul. She was supposed to fly back to Iran tomorrow. Apparently she has flown back to Iran today. We believe that her phone has been confiscated, her passport has been confiscated, and also a message has appeared on her Instagram account. She's got about 200,000 followers. And on that message, it apparently says that she's sorry and it was an accident. She forgot, apparently, to wear her headscarf. Now, I would treat that message with extreme caution. There is no way of knowing if she herself actually posted that message. And I know for a fact that lots of other people, when they've stood up against the Iranian regime on social media, they've been forced to issue retractions and apologies, and sometimes their phones have been seized and other people have posted messages purporting to be from them. So that is the situation as it stands, but you cannot overestimate how brave she was to do what she did.
Mm-hmm. So we don't at this moment know where she is now, and it's sometimes wrong to speculate, but history can sometimes point us in a direction. What could the consequences be now?
Well, we know that she was at the Iranian Embassy in South Korea. Thankfully, the International Climbing Federation, as you read out their statement, they say they have been in touch with her and they believe that she is safe. But once she's back in Iran, she's in the clutches of the Islamic authorities. In the past, anyone who's challenged them, anyone who stood up to them, has been taken to prison. That's the least that's going to happen to you. And that is what people close to Elnaz at the moment are worried about, is that when she goes back to Tehran, she will be taken to Evin prison in Tehran, which is probably the most notorious prison in the world. It is full of political prisoners, people who've stood up against the regime, and there was a horrendous fire at the prison over the weekend. The Islamic authorities claiming that 8 people died in that fire. So what people close to her will be very, very worried about is the possibility that she may, as we speak, be on her way to Evin prison.
Okay. Other ramifications, England begin their World Cup campaign, don't they, against Iran in just over a month's time. What happens if the diplomatic situation escalates?
Well, I think the situation has already escalated. What we've seen in Iran have been protests. A lot of people now believe that these protests have escalated, and what we're now seeing is a revolution in Iran. And you're right to make the point. In about a month's time, England will start their World Cup campaign against Iran in Qatar. This will be the first time that England have ever played Iran. And we will be hearing and reading a lot in the next few weeks about the issues between Iran and England and how this is going to be a game between 2 sworn enemies. Again, I would say to you, bear in mind, the Iranian people are not the enemies of England. You're talking about the Islamic Republic that rule Iran and Iranian people who have issues with England, the West and the USA. Now, the Iranian players, I spent a bit of time with them a couple of weeks ago when they were at a training camp and they were playing 2 games, 2 friendlies in Austria. They are in a very, very difficult position because I know for a fact that the vast majority of the Iranian players are in support of the protests that are happening in Iran right now, but they are not allowed to speak out. Again, if they were to challenge the regime, they would not be allowed to play for Iran. They would not be able to go to the World Cup, and if they actually played in Iran, they would probably be arrested and end up in prison as well. So you have to have sympathy for the players because they're in a very, very difficult position. They want to represent their country. Of course, it's their dream to play against teams like England at the World Cup. But at the same time, they're conscious of the fact that a revolution is happening in Iran at the moment, and this is not the time to be playing football. And they're also under pressure from very, very many Iranian people, not all Iranian people, but some Iranian people who think that they should make a stand by refusing to play at the World Cup. They say that the Iranian team should actually boycott the World Cup. They should not go there to represent the Islamic Republic of Iran. So you've got to feel for those players because at the moment they're in a very, very difficult situation. And you've got to also bear in mind that in Iran, the Iranian league, for the past 3 or 4 weeks, no fans have been allowed inside any of the stadiums. So all the games have been played behind closed doors. The reason is that the authorities are too worried that there will be big gathering of protesters and demonstrators at games. So all the games have been played in deserted stadiums. And you can watch some of the goals on social media if you look for it. Not a single goal in the past 3 weeks has been celebrated. So all the players, when they score, they just run back to the centre circle. So that is another strong message that the Iranian footballers, the players themselves, are also supporting the protests. So you will be hearing and reading a lot about these kind of issues in the build-up to this game between England and Iran next month. But please bear in mind, the Iranian people have no issue whatsoever with England, the UK government, or any English supporter or English football player. Far from it. Iranian people love football. The Premier League, the English Premier League, is probably the most watched programme on Iranian television. For them, it is absolute dream come true to be playing against England at the World Cup. But unfortunately, for the players, they are caught in a very, very difficult situation.
Kaveh, thank you very much.